So I'm personally very excited, the Hub team is very excited to have one of the brilliant minds in the blockchain industry. And I'm not just going to limit it to the blockchain industry, but in the tech world in general. We have Evan Cheng with us from the other part of the world coming to Abu Dhabi. I spent some time in the morning while I'm driving to Abu Dhabi looking up your profile. I wanted to do an intro of you. And all the versions of the intro I felt like does not give you justice of your background. So maybe we can go ahead and have you just do a quick intro to your background, where you've been, how you got into the blockchain space, and then we'll dig deep into the topic directly.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Peter. It's great to be here. So I'm Evan. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Mysten Lab. So I've been in the tech industry for, I don't even know, 26, 27 years. I did a little bit startup earlier in my career, followed by 10 years at Apple, where I did a lot of work in something called LLVM that runs in every laptop, computer, every smartphone, pretty much every smart device in the world. It's probably the basis for a ton of just about every piece of developer tools out there. So that's where I got the 2012 ACM Software System Award. That other award winner included the inventor of TCP/IP, Java web browser. So it's humbling to be among the giants of the world. So 10 years at Apple, followed by 6.5 years at Facebook. Initially, I work on some tech around programming language and runtime, but 2017-18 was when I got, 2016 actually is when I got the crypto bug. I started looking at Ethereum. I kind of understood the conceptual model. I understand the potential impact of such a technology, but I also saw the opportunity for myself because I think I saw how primitive the technology was, how in a lot of ways the design doesn't really lend it to much promise, in my opinion. If you think about the concept of smart contract being the platform for disintermediation, software replacing human or companies in the middle, you cannot trust software that's written in a language is fundamentally unprovable. There's no way you can prove it to be correct. You're basically doomed to, using duct tapes to cover its shortcomings. And that's exactly what happened. So they gave me an idea that I want to do something in the industry, but I also recognize it was extremely early. I didn't have the opportunity to hire the best minds of, in the various industry, in the various fields like distributed system, programming language, verification, cryptography. So when Facebook decided to take on the Libra project, I jumped at the opportunity, and that led to me here, right? So as I say, the rest is,
Yeah. What was this light bulb moment that made you do that jump? Tech world was still doing okay back then, and then you took this risk and went all in the digital asset blockchain world. What was this moment that made you do that?
It really was a no-brainer, right? I mean, at that point, I was convinced this is where the world is going. I saw it to be broader than what people consider to be crypto, right? Cryptocurrency payment is an obvious use case. But if you think beyond that, right, everything about value transfer, anything that you consider assets, are absolutely cumbersome compared to information, right? Even back in 2018, you see this very, very clear difference, right? Posting a message, liking a photo, sending any kind of digital information to another person is completely seamless, very, very comfortable, very, very easy. But anything that's value exchange, value transfer, payments, PayPal, right? Back then, everybody used PayPal. A lot of the payment system was so rudimentary. You see this, difference. And if you think beyond, generalize the problem from payment to something that's consider anything of value, you see the opportunity, right? So the concept of having software replacing human is obvious, where the future is going. Fast forward, right? And back then, nobody was talking about AI. Fast forward a few years later, now everybody's talking about AI. Content creation becomes so easy, but it's also presented us with a lot of dilemma, right? And how do you keep up with it? How does human keep up with it? We are going to rely on software. We're going to rely on a medium that can be trusted. We're going to have to rely on a ledger, a way to record information, record events that cannot be corrupted. So you combine all these signals together, this is where the world is going, right? If you ignore the noise, this is the transformation. It's inevitable.
Then before we dive a bit deeper into SUI, how do you see this industry compared to when you started a few years ago? I know it's still not in the prime. The market's still not doing as well. What changed in the past few years?
If you're a student of sort of transformations and any kind of technology transformation, you see this. AI had its trials and errors, multiple waves, right? You have this hype cycle. It's like, it's going to change the world, and then it doesn't. And then a few years of winters, so to speak, and then there's some improvement, then smart entrepreneur try again, and sometimes it doesn't work, and then you try again until you have a breakthrough, right? Even mobile phones, right? Mobile device went through that, right? You saw how rudimentary other things are, then you saw Sidekick, BlackBerry, that start approximating, you start to see this is going to be transformational, but it's not yet for everybody. Then iPhone came, right? And even iPhone early on didn't really transform our way of living quite yet. It really requires a few years maturation to get there. That's exactly what's happening in this, what do we want to call it, Web3 crypto space, right? We saw the waves come and go. There's a lot of hype. There's maybe one or two use cases every time that got everybody excited, overly excited. And if you dig a little bit deeper, and then you also recognize it's almost every time it's more hype than reality. But this time, I'm biased, right? But I think SUI and the transformation that's to come will really break through.
I remember the first time we met, you told me, I work under the radar, I try not to go a lot in the media and people not knowing my face, and then 2 minutes later someone jumped and took a selfie with you, so it was kind of a bit in between.
I didn't plan that.
So how did this change? Maybe walk us through the journey. When we first talked, you haven't launched yet. It was beginning of this year, and you haven't launched this. When was day one where, as Mysten Labs, as Evan, you started working on SUI? And tell us a bit more about the journey. We have in the audience founders, we have VCs, we have corporates, we have banks. Tell us from different perspectives, how did that journey go as a founder? How were you able to fundraise such a large amount with a large valuation before launch? From a VC perspective, what was that wow factor of SUI that made people invest such amounts? And what's the vision? What's the mission of SUI?
Yeah, so I have to tell the story. I have to go back to my time at, so the last 3.5 years at Facebook, where I was sort of running R&D for the Libra/DM project. It was a very ambitious project, but ultimately it was focused on one use case, payments, right? I was more of a platform person, so there's a little bit of that friction from the beginning. I'll say myself and my team were a little bit more ambitious, how to, and there's some disagreement about the approach we should take. So there's a little bit dissatisfaction with the work we were able to achieve on that project. So when it was very obvious the product wasn't going to launch, right, because the regulatory concerns, it was a very easy decision for my co-founder and I to say, well, it's time to do our own thing. And most of us have never founded a company before, has never run a company before, but we knew ourselves to be exceptional problem solvers, and we also complement each other very well in terms of skills. So we took a leap, and we got some advice from helpful people, and start the fundraising process even before we actually had a clear idea what we're going to build. What we had a clear ideas around was blockchain, as it was back in 2021, was not going to be its final form. There was many clear signals. The design was fundamentally limited. The use case is fundamentally limited. So we have some intuition and what we can do. But even though it took us some time to get to SUI, right? So the first round of fundraising was really a team bet from the investor. They saw our collective sort of brain power. So I mostly rely upon my co-founder, who are three of the technical co-founders, three of the most brilliant minds I have ever met, and they're very complementary in terms of their skills, right? Distributed system, cryptography, programming language, right? So perhaps the VC has never seen that combination before. So it was a team bet. It gave us some time to figure out what exactly we're going to build. And I still remember there was sometime around 2022, I'll say March. February, March is when the design of SUI came together. So that aha moment led to us figuring out the positioning of ourselves, and we were able to tell the story. And even though it was a very difficult environment because the crisis around Luna, Terra, and then Three Arrows, that we were able to raise a large amount of kind of money to get us to where we are.
How much did you raise, just for the sake?
So the second round, the Series B, we were able to raise $300 million. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so funding was the first element. First of all, you had the dream team. Second, you had the right funding. What other elements did you need to be able to launch SUI? What were you waiting for before going public and releasing the mainnet?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're building a company, the most important thing is your North Star, your mission, your goal, right? We were very clear from the beginning. This company is sort of going all in to transform not just the Web3 industry, but to transform the world. We have a clear vision what we want to accomplish. We're not yet another derivative blockchain that want to achieve some commercial success, right? We're in it for the long run. So it attracts the right kind of people as a result. Myself and my co-founder already have a reputation, right? So it's very easy for us to attract the right kind of people. So it's a very, very mature and very experienced team. And that's the most important part, is the team, right? Once you have a team that's aligned behind a vision, then, well, you do all the things you have to do, right? You tell your story in terms of marketing, because it's important to attract partner. This is not something we can build just ourselves. People talk about blockchain decentralization, right? Decentralization is about a community. It's about others contributing to our vision to help us accomplish what we want to accomplish. So we have to have like-minded partner. They take the long view as well. Marketing 101, if you ever follow what Steve Jobs has shared, right, it's about telling a story about your value. So for us, that's what's about, right? Our value, what we're trying to accomplish. So that's a very important part. So we build the technology, we build a coalition of partners, we build a community that's interested in what we're building. Then we iterate, right? We build products when we have to showcase exactly what we're saying. It's always easier to show than to tell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all those sort of things, right? So that has been the journey leading to the mainnet, which is now 1 month old.
Awesome. You mentioned two words which I want to deep dive a bit into, partnership and community. Just before we get into that topic, can you spend a minute or two just explaining what is blockchain? I know at least half of the people here do not understand the fundamentals of blockchain.
Yeah.
Second element is, why is SUI different than all the layer ones and the different blockchains that we see out there? What was this differentiator that you were aiming towards? And then we'll get to the partnership and community side.
So I don't want to go into a lot of details and technical jargons about blockchain, right? The way you can look at it is basically it's a trusted ledger. It's a verifiable content, right? Whatever is stored on a blockchain in terms of the record keeping, right? It's a ledger of record keeping. You can trust it because it's not controlled by one entity, right? It's the trust. You know, think about it today, right? Today, if you store you keep your money in a bank, right? You trust the bank to do the right thing. If you store your photos on Dropbox, you trust Dropbox not to abuse, right? That's trusting a centralized entity. The whole concept of blockchain is distributed trust, right? You don't trust one entity, you trust all of them together. Collectively, they sort of balance each other out. Even if you have some bad actors, the good actor will keep the integrity of your content, the record you store on the blockchain, right? So right now it's a very overloaded word. So also these days when you talk about blockchain like a layer one, blockchain like SUI, there's a programming environment on top of it, right? So why is that important? Well, what a smart contract is basically a piece of code that performs a function, that operates on the assets and the data on the blockchain, so to speak. You provide some input, it does perform something. So this is a powerful combination because now you can digitize assets, you can digitize content, and you have smart contracts that operate on them. So that's the very, very high level description of the basic concept. So applying that a little bit more specifically to, let's say, digital assets, right? People think about blockchain and think about things that's assets. There's generally two forms, right? One is the native assets where everything's live on the blockchain. You can think about a cryptocurrency being a native asset. The other one would be a real-world asset-backed digital assets. So, and that you talk about tokenization. Why is this an important concept, right? Because this is where the world is going, right? This is how things should be done in terms of how assets should be kept, how the processing should be done. And the tokenization today has focused on sort of the ownership aspect, right? If you have a piece of real estate, you tokenize it. People think about, well, you have the ownership record being kept on the blockchain, then you can transfer it more efficiently. You can fractionalize it, and a real estate can be owned by multiple parties rather than one. So that's a powerful concept. But you apply it, but it's also very limiting, right? Because this coming back to SUI, right? We recognized early on that mental model is broken, right? Because that model is basically assuming assets are static. Assets are done and finalized, which is never the case in real world, right? If you think about it, a business contract goes through stages of processing. Real estate transaction goes through stages of processing. Even if I buy a memorabilia, right, a sports car, later on, I run into the star player signs my sports car. It will undergo changes, right? So you quickly realize that conceptual model is broken. It's actually very, very limiting. If you think about tokenization as, tokenizing something that's already fixed and done, that's the basis of SUI's design, is fixing that problem right? We want you to think about digital assets on the blockchain as something that will go through transformation. It's not something that's static, be it native asset or a real-world based asset. It's going to change. So we rethought about the data model to be an object where you move more information from outside the blockchain onto the blockchain. Now you can have the smart contract perform the functions, the steps in the transformation of these assets, in the processing the asset, right? So that makes SUI, in our opinion, much more powerful than any other existing blockchains out there. You probably, any of you may be familiar with, how blockchain works. You can probably come up with many examples where developer try to do this transformation, right? Like I still remember Bored Apes. Everybody probably know Bored Apes and NFT. It was a lot of money back then. They have the Siren you buy and you combine the two, you have a mutated Bored Ape. The way they do it is basically create a new one, right? They're not transforming things, right? Because cannot be transformed. So that was a very obvious example that model failed, right? Going back to the sports car, the baseball card example. Well, if you buy an NFT, what if the creator signs your NFT? Can you do that? You cannot do that right now. So that data model is wrong. That processing model is wrong. So that's the basis of SUI. It's a data model. Then you think about the transaction processing issue. Blockchain is basically saying, well, I'm going to aggregate a block of transactions that happen in roughly the same time. Then I'm going to sequence them or order them. That's the job of the consensus. Then I'm going to execute them. Then I'm going to store the whole thing onto the state changes on the Merkle tree. That for anybody who is a thinker about computer science and been doing that for a long time, you immediately recognize something's wrong with it, right? Why are you ordering a lot of transactions that have no relationship to each other? There's no contention. They're not updating or touching the same sets of data. So that's also another example of things that was just done that way was clearly wrong. Finally, while you're storing everything, including your data, onto a Merkle tree data structure in the end, well, it's not. You shouldn't, right? This is the basis why the blockchains are always very expensive, very poor in terms of its ability to store data, right? So there are many things wrong with all the existing blockchains model, and we changed basically all of that.
Awesome. So you've built a dream team. You got enough money to launch the company. You reached that MVP or that differentiator in the market where your blockchain can outperform other blockchains. How did this define the partnerships? Which was the first batch of partners that you went to and said, this is the most relevant technology for you?
Yeah, it's actually surprisingly easy in a lot of ways and surprisingly difficult in a lot of other ways, right? When we think about partnership, we usually define them to be, kind of product builders, that want to transform their business in some way. So the first thing you have to do is recognize what is the things they care about. In today's world, the centralization of the internet is actually creating a lot of problems. Right, the brands, the product builders are having a difficulty acquiring customer. All the privacy concerns, all the limitations around tracking, making advertising far less effective than ever before. So that's one issue. The other one is how do they sort of retain the customer? How do they engage them? Why is that difficult? Well, because it's always an intermediate somewhere that basically is sitting between you and your customer. It's harder and harder to have that direct relationship, right? If you are creating something, you always want to have that direct relationship with your customers, your fans of your creation. And that's basically impossible because you always rely on some intermediary, some platform that have the network effect to help you find your customer, right? And they, for the business reason, they want to capture that relationship for themselves, right? And they utilize that relationship for advertising or whatever to make money. So the centralization of the internet to these major platforms actually have a massive impact on product builders. So if you understand that, then it's actually relatively easy to go to these partners to sell them the value of a blockchain, right? Which is allow you to have this direct relationship, allow you to have a direct distribution channel with of your goods, of your IP, and there's a way for you to engage them, right? But the current blockchain doesn't really allow that, right? Think about this model for a second. If you go to any IP holder, right, let's say Disney, they say, I have my content, I want to know who my fans are, I want to form a community around it. That's great, you can distribute them as NFTs, but then what then, right? You may, at best, you know, based on the on-chain activity, you know which wallets are holding that, but you're still waiting for them to engage with you. You still have this passive way of engaging that. What you want to do is to be able to push, right? So this will require new thinking in terms of your technology, right? The blockchain just doesn't, a lot of things just don't work.
Is it not overwhelming for companies like Disney to get direct access to that level of data? And I'm assuming there's a lot of scattered data. With the Web 2 world, you have an intermediary cleaning up the data or segmenting. How does it look like on chain for such companies?
I mean, the data is pretty direct and clean, right? Whoever holds your IP, it's there, it's transparent, right? This is a direct link between them, right? How do you engage with them? It's up to the brands, okay, right? So this is not like, I mean, this is what I was pointing to, right? The advertiser now, because they have to anonymize, right? Aggregate a lot of data. That data is very dirty, so you rely on others to sort of clean it up for you. And it's actually very ineffective. It's increasingly ineffective, right? This is why Apple is capable of doing, targeted advertising. You can opt out it, but it's by default they have a direct relationship because they're the platform, right? Yeah. They have that. But for the advertiser, they don't have that, right? They can't track across, multiple apps, right? This is why the Facebook of the world is suffering, right? Because their business model is disrupted. So you have this, everybody's disrupting everybody else, right? It's like Facebook were the one that sort of captured that relationship, or Instagram is a very good example, right? You post a photo, but Instagram have that information about who views your photo. But then now Facebook themselves, Instagram themselves are being disrupted by Apple, right? This is a layer of essentially range sinking, right? That's very damaging, right? If you continue to go down this path, right, who's making money? Right. So that's the change, right? That's the difficult part for product builders.
And then what industries do you see the most moving on chain?
Yeah, so the gaming is always the first one. Like gaming is always the first one to try new technology.
Why is that? I was wondering.
They're very creative, and they also very willing to always seeking new models, right? There's also, if you think about it, they also have assets that if they lose it or something goes wrong, it's not as critical, right? It's also not regulated, right? It's lightly regulated, even in the worst case, right? Even if you have virtual currency in a game, it's a closed loop, right? That just make it easy for them to move faster.
Okay. Moving on to the community, and I know that's something you guys have been proud of before the launch. You have one of the biggest communities on chain. How did you build that community? What does the community of developers, the projects building on chain, what do they look for, and why did they go on SUI?
Yeah, when we talk about community, there's always two, right? There's the developer community, the one that's building, then there's the user consumer community that they're excited about how they can leverage the technology. In our case, both are very big. For the developer communities, a lot of them were tracked by the technology, the prompts of the technology, our ability to explain to them how we can help them transform their product.
Excuse my ignorant question, but how easy is it to use the language while building on SUI if I'm a genetic engineer?
So there's always a learning curve when something is new, right? In this case, we have a new variant of Move language. But at the same time, once you overcome that learning curve, the feedback we receive is a tremendous, sort of increase in productivity, because finally there's a language that looks like a normal programming language rather than this kind of almost like assembly type of thing where you have to manage ownership model, you have to worry about reentrancy, all these things that sometimes feel like you have to be a security engineer to get right. So the feedback has been great, right, on that. So yeah, we have no real challenge in attracting developers, and because they see the promise. The challenge with that is we also need to help them be successful, right? We'll keep the momentum up. So that's part of the promise is we will help them be successful, because ultimately that's what's going to keep it going. And then the other parts of the community, basically enthusiastic, user communities, kind of come along, right? Because we have a very clear voice, somewhat authentic voice, right? We are not just yet another blockchain you have seen over and over again and focus on, some complexity, right? You don't ever sell complexity as a product. You sell what problem you're solving, what value does it create, right? So I think that attract a lot of the community member. So yeah, I mean that's if you follow us, right, you see that we're being very, very straightforward about what we're trying to build. We don't overhype it. We don't focus on you're going to get free stuff, right? We actually made it very clear from the beginning you are not getting free stuff. So all that, right?
Did this anger a few people? I saw a few
anger,
hashtags on Twitter.
Yeah, what are you going to do, right? You're never going to be able to satisfy everybody, even though we're very clear from the beginning and people are still holding on hope. It's going to be free stuff, in this current regulatory environment, especially in the US, that was never in the cards.
So what's next? What's the next big thing coming out of SUI?
Well, I mean, right now we're still in this launch stage, right? People say, "Oh, mainnet, congratulations." Well, that's us, kind of racing to the starting point. And it's been 1 month. We sort of gradually onboarding, helping the developer, launching. We want to work with them to make sure they launch successfully. Want to make sure they don't rush. We want to help them understand how to acquire customer, how to do marketing campaign and all that. So that's what's going to happen, right? We start going to help them with their go-to-market strategy, acquire customer, running marketing campaign like, hey, if you go to this app, do this, you go to that app to do this, and the step, you get some rewards, right? You actually perform action, this literally what we call is an action framework, then you're going to get rewarded, right? So we're helping the early developer to, acquire customers, retain the customer, and gradually onboard, helping other developer to launch their product successfully. It's never about quantity. A few other things are coming on board. A lot of other things are coming on board. We're literally still very much in this staging period. So the next couple months is going to be focusing on around getting more, liquidity on the chain, getting more apps successfully launching, getting some big partners ready to launch their product, right? We would just announce revolutionize partnership. We want to do the kind of fan engagement program we want to do within not your typical fan engagements. You get some stickers essentially, or you get some NFT, you can buy some NFTs, right? Engagement of fans is about actively working with them, right? Actively helping them to entice, reward their fans, sometimes real time, right? So that sort of programs are going to be happening. At the same time, we are building a lot of other examples and onboarding other bigger partners that will showcase, yeah.
Awesome. We have around 200 startups in this space across 20 different sectors, and a lot of them, when they hear Web3 digital assets, they continue their day, think it's irrelevant for them. You mentioned real-life assets, real-life use cases moving onto the chain. What's a piece of advice that you can give startups here in the audience that are building something on health or climate tech or just the SaaS software, where they can benefit from someone like you and SUI and the whole blockchain world?
Yeah, I mean, think about this, the mental model here, right? How everything is being transformed, right? More things are being produced, more content are being produced, more information, more data. It's going to become very, very difficult, especially with the AI's advancement. It's going to be impossible to tell what's authentic, what's fake, who is good, who is bad. Think about for the second. Human cannot possibly keep up with it. Software are not going to wait around for humans. Software is going to interact with software, right? You have this explosion. The job of a blockchain, one of the jobs as a blockchain is to provide a authentic, verified layer, right? Something that you can say, this is verified and trusted, and it cannot be changed, cannot be tinkered with, cannot be corrupted. Think about that for a second. Pretty much everything in the world, every industry, every change, it's going to require that layer. It's going to require that, basically a neutral foundation, a ledger to record it, to prove it's authentic, right? So, unfortunately, this industry Web3 industry has done a bad job on marketing, right? Coming back to marketing 101 is telling you value. That is the value, right? So think about that for a second, right? That is what's going to happen. It has to happen. Otherwise, we'll live in a world where no one can tell who is real or not, who is good or bad, right? So do not dismiss this. This is what is about. Yeah. So it's going to be in every part of everyone's life. It doesn't have to be in your face, right? You shouldn't have to think about Web3 crypto as I have to use a MetaMask or some wallet, I have to pay gas for transactions, I have to click a bunch of buttons because things are going to pop up on my screen, right? That makes no sense to me. Think about things that happen in the background. This is the infrastructure the human race is going to absolutely need to help us understand what's real or not.
Nice. And then how do you see the future of the industry in general, not SUI related? Overall, what do you think is the next cycle?
Well, I think we hope, obviously, we expect this is the phase where we bring people, you hear this a lot, bring more user to Web3. No, the thing is bring Web3 to user. So this is imbue this authenticity into every product in the future, right? So it's not going to be talked about as that, right? It always like crypto cycles. It's going to be in every parts of our life, and that's what's going to happen, and that's what we're going to enable. That's the sort of the next wave, so to speak.
And then what's the relevance of this region, UAE, Abu Dhabi? You're originally from Taiwan, right?
Yes.
You live in the US, you're not related to the region, and now you're here. What drew you here? What's exciting about Abu Dhabi?
So great question. There's many reasons why I'm here, right? So if you look around, what's to come requires somebody taking that first step forward. So the challenge we have today is you need an environment where the government and the regulatory bodies want to promote this. You want a nation like UAE that want to transform its industry from oil and gas-based to knowledge-based. You want regulatory body that's willing and able to work with innovators to at least keep up with innovation. In some parts of the world, such as the US, the regulators trying to regulate digital asset with security laws from 1930s, right? So then you realize that it's not going to work. So then you think about this is an area there's already a lot of development around asset management. There's a lot of markets, global, Abu Dhabi global markets, right? It's about all these assets, right? So you recognize this is the spot. This is very likely where the first step is going to happen, this kind of transformation. UAE is probably going to be the first one that take that step forward to show the world how it's going to be done. Then the rest of the world will follow, right? And that's why I'm here, right? There's a few other markets are opening up and understanding this, but I don't see many have this unique combination, all this factor. They make it the prime candidate to emerge as a leader.
Awesome. It's a very nice way to end the session. I would leave you with one last word. If we look back 3, 5, 10 years from now and said, Evan was in Hub 71 and he said this, what do you want to leave us with? One piece of advice.
It's only one piece of advice. It's a tough one. Yeah, whether we like it or not, right, this is inevitable, right? This is the kind of transformation that will happen. Keep the long-term view, right? Too often people are, focus on right now. What have you done for me lately? I don't see anything interesting right now, and they dismiss and move on, right? I'll say the one piece of advice I have for everybody, regardless whether you're a developer, just consumer, investor, whatnot, right? Take a long-term view. Keep an open mind. Think a little bit deeper beyond what you see. You'll see this is going to happen.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Peter.
being here.
Thank you.